Hi everyone, it's Ruth McBride here. Mrs. Dunlap. We're going to read chapter 11 together today of The Color of Water. And I thought since this is from mommy's point of view or perspective in her old age, I thought I would embody that persona for you. So I'll be reading chapter 11 to you today in spirit as Mrs. Ruth McBride. Okay. Before we get into chapter 11, I just wanted you to make sure that you took a look at Monday's lesson here. Make sure that you took the Google form that I sent you. Your feedback is really important for me to plan lessons for us and for the upcoming week. So please take that. And then, as I said, we're going to read and listen to and annotate chapter 11 of The Color of Water together. Make sure you have your annotation bookmark out. Hopefully you still have that. That's tucked in your book somewhere. We're going to obviously be marking the text up using that. Don't forget about your vocab. You've got a hyperlink in your online plans here. Go and see if you have any chapter 11 vocab words that you need to define. And then I'll be posting a threaded discussion question for us about chapter 11. Okay? All right. Okay, chapter 11 is entitled Boys. I'm going to make the screen a little bit bigger for you here. And of course, it's in italics, so it's in mommy's point of view, as we remember. And I'm going to read this to you and make sure you follow along and annotate. So have your pens, bookmark, highlighter, anything out that you need. Okay? Here we go. If there was one thing Tate didn't like more than Gentiles, which are non-Jewish people, it was black folks. And if there was one thing he didn't like more than black folks in general, it was black men in particular. So it stands to reason that the first thing I fell in love with in life was a black man. I didn't do it on purpose. I was a rebellious little girl in my own quiet way. But I wasn't so rebellious that I wanted to risk my own life or anybody else's life. They would kill a black man for looking at a white woman in the South in those days. They'd hang him, and the girl, they'd run her out of town. Who wants trouble like that? But as I became a teenager, I wanted the same things as any teenage girl wants. I wanted love, nice clothes, and a date. I never had that. My life was the store. My life hadn't changed since elementary school. The only break I got was when Mame would send me to her relatives in New York during summers. But in fact, my responsibility for the store grew after my brother Sam ran off. My daily routine never changed. Open the store at 7, school till 3, come straight home and work till 10, then flop to sleep. Work all day through the weekend except the Sabbath, then back to school on Monday. My only freedom was to swipe pennies from the store drawer and walk downtown with Dee Dee to buy romance magazines like True Love and True Romance. They used to tear the front cover off the back issues of the romance magazines and sell them by the bundle for 10 cents. We'd read them on the Sabbath by candlelight. We'd read them on the Sabbath by candlelight. You couldn't light a stove or play or tear paper or ride in a car on the Sabbath, but you could read. So if you want to annotate here Jewish traditions or Jewish customs, you might want to do that since she's telling you that there, okay? It wasn't like I had a great family life to turn to. We went to synagogue together on Sunday morning and Jewish holidays, but Tate didn't love Mame. His idea of a family outing was to take me and my sister to a chicken farm in Portsmouth, Virginia, where he'd slaughter chickens according to kosher law so he could sell them to Jewish customers. He would sit on a low box or stool, pick up the chicken, hold it by its neck face up, and slit it across the neck. Then he'd toss it away and grab another one while the headless chicken would fluff and flap around, give a few heavy shakes, and die. This is imagery here if you want to label that, okay? I was never asked out for a date by anyone at school. I loved to dance and had long legs, and I once auditioned for a dance musical at school and made it, but some of the girls made such a fuss over having to dance next to a Jew that I dropped out of it. During my gym class, when we'd pick tennis partners, the girls would pick and pick until I'd be standing alone. If Frances wasn't around, remember Frances is her friend, I wouldn't get picked. I'd like to say I didn't care about my classmates and what they thought of me. But when I was a teenager, I wanted to be like them, American and WASP, and going around in style, going dancing, but my parents wouldn't have that. I know WASP is one of your vocab words on your sheet, so make sure you look that up. It's an acronym, okay? Dancing, forget it. New clothes, no way. Tate was the one who decided what clothes we wore, and he'd buy the cheapest things he could find. He was used to us getting hand-me-downs from the congregation's church, and that was fine with him. We'd buy a brand new V8 car every year, but he couldn't see the logic in buying new clothes when you got cheap hand-me-downs for free. I once wanted these white moccasin type shoes that were the fashion in those days, and I bothered Tate to buy them for me so much he got sick of me and relented. We went downtown and the clerk showed us a pair 2 sizes too big. I put them on and said, "They're perfect." Tate looked at me like I was crazy. "They're too big," he said. "This is how they're supposed to fit," I said. I was afraid he would change his mind. And the clerk, he wanted to sell those things and make his money, so he babbled out, "Oh, they're perfect, Reverend Shilsky, they're perfect." Tate grumbled about it, but he paid for them. The moccasins were so big, my feet squeaked and squished in them, and they'd been plunged in a bucket of water. I went squishing down the hallway in school, and the kids laughed at them, so I took them off. None of the boys in school would ever bother me, so after a while I had me my own friend, and he didn't care that I wore second clothes or was Jewish. He never judged me. That's the first thing I liked about him. In fact, that's what I liked about black folks all my life. They never judged me. I would underline that. That's important. My black friends never asked me how much money I made or what school my children went to or anything like that. They just said, "Come as you are." Blacks have always been peaceful and trusting. I don't care what they show on TV. These stupid boys with guns and these murderers they show on the news, those aren't the majority. Most blacks are peaceful and trusting. That's why they're made a fool of so easily. Make sure you underline that. That's important. So here's a description of her boyfriend. You might want to note that in your annotations there. My boyfriend's name was Peter, and he lived in one of the houses on the road behind the store. He was a tall, handsome young man. These are all details, if you want to label that. Dark skin with beautiful teeth and a beautiful smile. He'd come into the store and buy Coca-Colas, crackers, gum, or other small items. I didn't notice him at first because I was always busy when he came in the store. There was plenty of work to do, not just behind the counter, but elsewhere, like the wholesalers used to sell magazine or margarine without the yellow in it, so I'd have to go in the back and add the yellow dye to it, stir it around in a big barrel, or go into the ice freezer and pull out big blocks of meat and ice to chop up and lay out. Just any number of things. But he'd come and find me in the store alone somehow, and he'd linger, chatting or teasing me and trying to get me to smile in some way. He had a sense of humor that made me laugh all the time, and I began to look forward to his coming by. He'd always make sure Tate and Mame weren't around, which was difficult because Tate kept a close eye on his daughters, but Peter would find his moments. One day he saw me outside pumping kerosene out of the tank, and he came around and asked me to go for a walk, and I said yes. He was a bold guy because from that moment on, he was risking his life. God knows what I was thinking about. The only thing I told him was, if my father sees us, we're in trouble. Tate, with his loaded pistol, would have shot him, certainly, and probably me too. But it didn't matter to me. I was naive and young, and before you know it, I fell in love with him. I loved that boy to death, and he loved me. At least I thought he did. Who cared that he was black? He was the first man other than my grandfather who ever showed me any kindness in my life, and he did it at the risk of his own because they would have strung him up faster than you can blink if they'd found out. Not just the Ku Klux Klan, but the regular white folks in town would have killed him. Half of them were probably the Klan anyway, so it was all the same. Death was always around Suffolk, always around. It was always so hot, and everyone was so polite, and everything was all surface, but underneath it was like a bomb waiting to go off. That's a simile there. I always felt that way about the South, that beneath the smiles and Southern hospitality and politeness were a lot of guns and liquor and secrets. A lot of those secrets ended up floating down the Nansemond River just down the road from us. Folks would go down to the wharf and throw out nets for crabs and turtles and haul in human bodies. I remember one of our customers, Mrs. Mayfield. They found her son out there. He wasn't more than 17 or so. He'd been killed and tied to a wagon wheel and tossed into the water until he drowned, or the crabs ate him. A crab will eat anything. You have never seen me eat a crab to this day, and you never will. Well, Peter and I were having our regular little rendezvous carefully arranged. We'd meet in the yard or the passage behind the store, or he'd write a note and slip it to me secretly. If the store was closed, he'd slide the note under the front door. On the Sabbath, Friday nights, it was a thrill for me to pretend I was going downstairs to the kitchen and then creep into the store to pick up the torrid love notes he slipped under the door. He would pledge his love for me no matter what and write out the plan for our current secret meeting. At the appointed time, he'd come by and pick me up in a car, and I'd get into the back seat and lie flat so I wouldn't be seen. He had friends that lived out in the country in isolated areas, and that's where we would be together. My whole life changed after I fell in love. It was like the sun started shining on me for the first time, and for the first time in my life I began to smile. I was loved, and I didn't care what anyone thought. I wasn't worried about getting caught, but I did notice that Peter's friends were terrified of me. They stayed clear any time I came near them. They'd walk away from me if they saw me walking down the road coming toward them, and if they came to the store, they wouldn't even look at me. That started to worry me a little bit, but I didn't worry much. Then after a while, my period was late, by a week. Then another 2 weeks. Then it never came. Well, the whole thing just started to unravel on me then. I was pregnant and couldn't tell a soul. The white folks would have killed him, and my father would have killed him. I had maybe just turned 15 then. There wasn't a person I could tell. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, just sit straight up in bed in a sweat, and go outside to the back balcony to hide my tears from my sister. I did consider telling Frances, but that was too much to ask. This was 1936. What I did was way, way out as far as white folks were concerned. It was trouble. I couldn't bring Frances into that. There was no one to tell. I'd just sit there on the balcony at night while everyone slept and cry and watch the moon. I never thought to kill myself, never that, but I'd cry for a while, and after I was finished crying, I'd look out over the black section of town for my boyfriend. Can you believe that? I was in it thick up to my neck, and I'm still looking for my boyfriend. I thought he had all the answers. If there was moonlight, you could see out there down the back roads behind our store where the black folks live, and from the balcony, I'd look for him. I knew how he walked and moved and dressed and everything. I could recognize him at a distance from his walk. I'd look to see if he was safe at home because I had always heard the Klan comes at night to get you. And after they found that Mayfield boy floating in the wharf tied to the wagon wheel, I worried about him. I'd sit up half the night expecting the Klan to come riding past the store in those Tin Lizzie Model A cars. And what would I do if they did? I had no idea. The law wasn't for the black man in Virginia in those days. It was against him. The thing was, I was supposed to be white and number one, too. That was a big thing in the South. You're white, and even if you're a Jew, since you're white, you're better than a so-called colored. Well, I didn't feel number one with nobody but him, and I didn't give a hoot that he was black. He was kind and good, and I knew that. And I wanted to tell folks that, and I wanted to shout, "Hey, y'all, it really doesn't matter." I actually believed folks would accept that, and that they'd see what a good person he was and maybe accept us. And I went through a few days of thinking this, after which I told him one night, "Let's run off to the country and get married." And he said, "No way, I don't know where that's been done before. White and black marrying in Virginia. They will surely hang me." I grew really frightened then because he'd never talked that way before, and I could see he was afraid. He said, "If white folks find out you're pregnant by me, I will surely hang." The truth hit me hard then, and when I realized he didn't have any solutions, and I began to panic. What a fool I was to believe we could get away with it. I'd sit on the balcony chastising myself a million times for what I'd done and waiting for the Klan to come kill him and for my father to kill us both. But the days passed and nothing happened. I said to myself, "We are lucky no white folks know about us." I was sure none knew. Some black folks knew, some of Peter's friends, but none of the white folks knew. None, except for one. There was one white person who did know. Peter and I used to meet in an alley behind the store, and one night we were back there arguing about what to do, and I dropped my bracelet on the ground. It was a cheap little dime store bracelet, but I bought it with my own money, and I liked it. It was pitch black there, and we couldn't find it without a match or a light, so we left it. When I went out there to find it the next day, it was gone. Mommy came up to me in the store a couple days later while I was standing behind the counter and placed the bracelet on the counter. Real quiet. Just placed it on the counter and limped back to her little chair by the door where she always sat in her apron sorting and stacking vegetables. "Why don't you go to New York this summer to your grandmother?" she said. Okay, that is the end of chapter 11. I hope you enjoyed that. Wow, a lot happened in chapter 11. I'm going to be posting a threaded discussion question for you, so if you could answer that and respond to at least two other people, that would be great. Tune in for what we'll be doing for the rest of the week, but I hope you enjoyed chapter 11, and we'll be picking up more at the Color of Water next week. Have a great day.